Israeli military says it has killed a senior Hezbollah commander in a drone strike in southern Lebanon. According to the IDF, the strike destroyed a Hezbollah military site and killed Hussein Ali Nasr, the deputy head of Unit 4400, which oversees weapons smuggling. Israel's military says Nasr was working to smuggle weapons and funds into Lebanon to help rebuild Hezbollah's arsenal. They also claim he coordinated directly with Iranian operatives, even using Beirut's international airport to move weapons. The strike, part of a broader Israeli campaign, targeted Hezbollah's Unit 4400, which Israel says funnels arms from Iran through Syria and Iraq into Lebanon. The Israeli military has said professional failures led to the killing of 15 emergency workers in Gaza last month. An investigation into the incident by the Israeli Defense Ministry found a series of failings, including an operational misunderstanding and breach of orders. The medics and other rescue workers were killed when responding to distress calls near the southern Gaza city of Rafah on 23rd of March, days into Israel's renewed offensive in the Strip. The Israeli military said it has dismissed a deputy commander of reconnaissance over the killings. It has also censured the commander of the 14th Reserve Armored Brigade. Yunus al-Khatib, who is the president of the Palestinian Red Crescent in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, has said that an autopsy of the victims revealed that all the martyrs were shot in the upper part of their bodies with the intent to kill, an accusation rejected by the IDF. Multiple U.S. media reports are saying that U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth shared details of attacks on Houthi rebels in a second Signal group chat. And this group chat included his wife, brother and personal lawyer. Citing sources familiar with the chat group, the New York Times reported that Hegseth shared detailed information about forthcoming strikes in Yemen on the 15th of March on the group chat. As per the New York Times report, Hegseth shared the flight schedules for the FA-18 Hornets targeting the Houthis in Yemen. Essentially, the same attack plans that he shared on a separate Signal chat the same day that mistakenly included the editor of The Atlantic, which eventually became known as the Signal Gate. US Vice President J.D. Vance has landed in New Delhi for his 4-day visit to India. Accompanied by his wife Usha Vance and their 3 children, Vance's trip is the first by a sitting US Vice President to India in over a decade. His sons Evan and Vivek were dressed in Indian attire as they landed in New Delhi. Even his daughter was dressed in Indian attire. India's Information and Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw has received the US Vice President and his family at the Palam Airport. The Vice President will travel to Agra, Jaipur during his visit. The visit comes weeks after Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard visited India. The Ukrainian Air Force issued air raid alerts for capital Kyiv, while several blasts shook the eastern Ukrainian city of Mykolaiv hours after an end of Russia's one-day Easter ceasefire. The latest barrage of attacks came after US President Donald Trump expressed hope that Russia and Ukraine will strike a deal this week to end the war in Ukraine. In a post on Truth Social, Trump wrote, and I quote, "Hopefully Russia and Ukraine will make a deal this week. Both will then start to do big business with the United States of America, which is thriving, and make a fortune." Trump's comments came even as Ukraine accused Russia of blatant violation of the Easter truce announced by Russian President Vladimir Putin himself. A Gurdwara in Canada's Vancouver and Surrey's Lakshmi Narayan Temple have been desecrated with pro-Khalistan graffiti. Established in the year 1906, the Khalsa Diwan Society Gurdwara, better known as the Ross Street Gurdwara, organized the Vaisakhi parade last weekend. However, they prohibited pro-Khalistan groups from participating in the event, which reports say likely led to the vandalism. After the episode in Vancouver, the Lakshmi Narayan Mandir in Surrey in British Columbia was also defaced with similar graffiti. Temple spokesperson said their assessment was that these incidents were linked with the Ross Street Gurdwara, as the Lakshmi Narayan Mandir was at the forefront of an effort to forge unity between the Sikh and Hindu communities in Canada, which stand united. He said it wasn't a coincidence, adding that it was all done in a planned manner to intimidate them. El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele has proposed a prisoner exchange with Venezuela. Bukele offered repatriation of 252 Venezuelans deported by the US in exchange for the release of an equal number of political prisoners in Venezuela. However, Venezuela's Attorney General has dismissed the proposal as cynical. Bukele made the proposal in a post on social media. Bukele said his foreign ministry would formally present the proposal to the Venezuelan government through diplomatic channels. The post also shared the names of some of the political prisoners who could be part of this exchange. These included journalist Roland Carreno, human rights lawyer Rocio San Miguel, and the mother of Venezuelan opposition leader Mara Corina Machado. A Boeing 737 MAX jet originally intended for China's Xiamen Airlines has landed back at the company's production hub in the United States, becoming a casualty of the escalating US-China trade tensions. The jet, painted in Xiamen livery, returned to Seattle after refueling stops in Guam and Hawaii. President Trump recently raised tariffs on Chinese imports to 145% in response. China imposed a 125% tariff on US goods, making delivery of American-made aircraft financially unfeasible for Chinese airlines. It remains unclear who decided to send the jet back. Boeing and Xiamen Airlines have not responded to Reuters' requests for comment. China said that it firmly opposes other countries making trade deals with the United States at Beijing's expense and warned that it would take countermeasures against them. While the rest of the world has been slapped with a blanket 10% tariff, China faces levies of up to 245% on many products. Beijing has responded with duties of 125% on US goods. A number of countries are now engaged in negotiations with the US to lower tariffs, parallel to Washington's full trade war against top US economic rival China. Beijing warned nations not to seek a deal with the United States that compromised its interests. Impeached South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has appeared at the second hearing of a criminal trial over charges that he led an insurrection. After leaving his house in a motorcade, Yoon Suk-yeol entered the Seoul Central District Court wearing a dark navy suit and red tie. The court granted media access to the trial, allowing journalists to briefly film and photograph the former president inside the courtroom. Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law attempt in December plunged the country into months of turmoil and led to the Constitutional Court removing him from presidency. Yoon Suk-yeol denied paralyzing the government and said martial law was needed to alert the people on how the majority opposition party was stonewalling government by impeaching more than 20 officials. South Korea's acting president has said that South Korea's finance and trade ministers will hold high-level trade talks in Washington this week as they look to avoid Donald Trump's steep tariffs. The country is a major exporter to the United States, and giants such as Samsung Electronics and automaker Hyundai stand to take a hefty hit if the White House goes ahead. Acting President Han Duck-soo has said during a phone call with Donald Trump, both the leaders agreed to hold constructive discussions on economic cooperation, including the trade balance between South Korea and US. Sri Lankan police have launched an investigation after a picture of Buddha's tooth relic went viral. The Criminal Investigation Department has been directed to probe whether the picture was taken during the display of the ancient relic or was it doctored. The object is currently kept at the Temple of Tooth in Kandy. Devotees are allowed to see it in the presence of tight security, while photography is strictly prohibited. Sri Lankan police has considered the incident a serious security lapse. Everyone is frisked before being allowed to enter the temple area, which is guarded by plainclothes officers. Therefore, it is extremely puzzling on how that photograph was clicked. The CID is now investigating if the photograph was taken by a worshipper during one of the current exhibitions or if it is simply a doctored image. Khalistani, a minister in the Pakistan government, was attacked in Sindh by protesters opposing the federal government's controversial irrigation canal projects. Protesters believe that the project would reduce downward flow of rivers that are key for irrigation in the southern province. Khalistani, State Minister for Religious Affairs, was driving through the Thata district of the province when protesters pelted tomatoes and potatoes at his motorcade. They also chanted slogans against Pakistan's federal government. Jammu and Kashmir government has directed closure of all schools in the valley in view of heavy rains. This is according to an official statement. Jammu and Kashmir Education Minister has said that the decision was taken as a precautionary step. Kashmir Valley has been lashed by heavy rains over the past 48 hours, even as the Weather Office has forecast more precipitation over the next 24 hours. Asian equities and US stock futures slid in early trade as anxiety over tariffs and public criticism of the Federal Reserve by President Trump hit sentiment, pushing the dollar down sharply and catapulting safe haven gold to a record high. Indian stocks bucked the trend after big banks reported a strong set of numbers over the weekend. Trump launched a series of attacks against Fed Chair Jerome Powell on Thursday, with his team evaluating whether they could fire Powell, a move that has great consequence for the central bank's independence and for global markets. With the US earnings season kicking off, investors' focus this week will be on results from tech bellwether Alphabet, chipmaker Intel and EV maker Tesla. All the Magnificent Seven mega cap stocks sharply lower in 2025, with Alphabet down about 20% and Tesla 40%. The dollar dived in early trade as investor confidence in the US economy took another hit over US President Trump's plans to shake up the Federal Reserve, which would throw into question the independence of the central bank. The dollar sank to a decade low against the Swiss franc. The euro broke above $1.15, while the New Zealand dollar reclaimed the 0.60 level for the first time in more than 5 months. Trading was thinned with markets in Australia and Hong Kong closed for Easter Monday. Most markets globally were closed on Friday for a holiday. Trump's sweeping tariffs and uncertainty over his trade policies have sent global markets into a tailspin and darkened the outlook for the world's largest economy. Oil prices fell more than 1.5% in early trade as investors once again focused on concerns. OPEC Plus, the group of major producers, including the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and allies such as Russia, is still expected to hike output by 411,000 barrels per day starting in May. However, experts say that some of that increase may be offset by cuts from various countries that have been exceeding their quotas. Prices also declined as some supply worries eased following signs of progress in nuclear talks between US and Iran. The talks progressed further on the recent talks which concluded on Saturday. Concerns about tightening Iranian oil supply and hopes for a trade deal between the US and European Union pushed Brent and US oil up about 5%. Still, markets remain worried about the effects of the aggressive US tariff policy.